Welcome, deep divers. We're so glad you're joining us today. We're diving into a surprisingly common kind of mystery one that really touches on everything, from our gardens to how we solve problems every day. You know that feeling when something you're nurturing, maybe a plant, maybe a project, just starts looking, well, a bit off, like its usual vibrancy is fading and you're scratching your head wondering, what basic thing did I miss? Well, today we're getting to the bottom of just such a puzzle. It centers around a specific plant. Andrographis paniculata. Now, for those who might not know it, it's often called the king of bitters. That name kind of hints at its big role in traditional medicine. And our mystery today is, why were its usually bright green leaves turning this unhealthy, almost worrying red-brownish color? We're digging into Ang's notes on gardening, specifically part 652, to find the surprising root cause. Yeah, pun intended, of this discoloration. And our mission isn't just about fixing a plant problem. It's about pulling out a bigger lesson, really, about observation and how often the simplest answers are right there, but we just don't see them.
Okay, so let's unpack this. When Aang first noticed these unhappy-looking leaves, it sounds like their first thoughts went to some pretty common culprits. In an earlier post, part 495, Aang was thinking maybe nutrient deficiencies or pH imbalances, even diseases. But for those of us maybe not deep into gardening, why are those the typical first suspects? What makes us jump to those conclusions when a plant looks sick?
That's a really great question. And it gets right to how we usually tackle these things, doesn't it? When a plant, or really any system, starts looking, wrong, these are the standard checks, the textbook answers almost. Take nutrient deficiencies, very common cause for weird leaf colors, not enough nitrogen. You often get yellowing, especially on the older leaves. Magnesium deficiency, that can cause yellowing between the leaf veins. It's quite distinct.
Okay, patterns.
Exactly. Then you have pH balance in the soil. That's the acidity or alkalinity. Even if the nutrients are there, if the pH is off, the plant just can't absorb them properly.
Like a locked pantry.
Precisely. It's like having food but no way to get to it. And then, of course, diseases, fungal, bacterial. They can mimic almost anything, so you really have to rule those out. Aang's initial thinking was perfectly logical, based on solid gardening knowledge, but, well, as we're about to see, sometimes even the most logical first steps don't quite hit the mark, especially if something more basic is going on.
It definitely sounds like the right place to start for any gardener. But I'm curious, did Aang's notes suggest, maybe, a bit of frustration? Or that moment of, this isn't adding up? Because that often feels like the real turning point in solving something, right? When the usual suspects have alibis.
Yes, exactly. Aang's notes really trace that journey. Those first ideas, they were sound, but they just weren't explaining everything. What really shines through is Aang's careful observation, the importance of stepping back and looking at the bigger picture, the context. Instead of seeing a problem hitting all the Andrographis plants equally, Aang noticed something specific, this red-brownish color. It was way worse in plants in certain spots, very specific locations.
Oh, sure.
It wasn't a widespread issue. It was localized. That kind of pattern spotting, that's often the key.
So not something affecting every single plant the same way, but tied to where they were planted. And here's the clincher, right? The Andrographis plant that looked the absolute worst. It was growing right next to a Bougainvillea. Now, to many of us, that might just sound like companion planting. But I suspect this detail is, well, everything.
It really is. This is that breakthrough moment. And it just highlights the sheer power of simple, direct observation. It's fundamental, not just for gardening, but like science, troubleshooting, anything really. When your first ideas don't quite fit the facts, the best thing you can do is just step back. Look closer at the specific situation, the immediate environment. Aang shifted focus from what's wrong with the plant, the what's different about this plant's spot.
The surroundings.
Yeah. That change in perspective, moving from a general issue to a specific interaction, it's critical. It lets you see connections, patterns, weird little anomalies you'd totally miss otherwise if you were stuck on your first theory. It's about, letting the situation speak for itself rather than forcing your ideas onto it. It kind of reminds me of those times, you're pulling your hair out over some complex computer glitch, only to find out the power cable wasn't pushed in all the way. The simple answer is often just sitting there.
That's a perfect analogy. So relatable. Okay, so let's connect these dots for you, the listener, because this is where it all clicks. The Bougainvillea. Aang's notes mention it mainly relied on rainwater.
Right.
Bougainvilleas are pretty tough, drought tolerant once they get going.
Yeah.
And lots of gardeners just let them ride out the dry spells between rains. This one little detail about the Bougainvillea's water habits, that turned out to be the absolute key to understanding what was happening with the Andrographis paniculata. It explained it all.
Yes. If you connect that to the whole picture, this is the aha moment. Because that Bougainvillea was mostly getting by on rainwater, probably wasn't getting much extra watering from Aang.
Okay.
The Andrographis planted right beside it was inevitably getting the same treatment, meaning inconsistent watering, or most likely just plain underwatering.
Collateral dryness.
Exactly. Think about it. The Bougainvillea can handle being dry for ages, but the Andrographis next door, it's suffering those same conditions, even though it probably needs more regular water. This inconsistency, or just a serious lack of water, that was the main stress factor causing that red-brownish color. When plants don't get enough water consistently, their whole system gets disrupted. Their cells lose pressure, botanists call it turgor. Even basic stuff like photosynthesis, how they make energy from light, it slows right down.
Right.
And sometimes, as a stress response, the plant might produce different pigments, like anthocyanins, those are the reds and purples you see in berries, or other pigments break down. That leads straight to that red, brownish look we saw. It's basically the plant screaming for a drink, a visible sign that its most basic need isn't being met.
And it's just amazing, isn't it, how often something so fundamental like consistent watering gets overlooked. We jump straight to thinking about complex deficiencies or diseases when it's something much simpler. It's, like you said, checking the plug before you rewire the house.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful reminder, I think. Sometimes the simplest fixes are the best ones in the garden and, well, everywhere else too. We complicate things. So once Aang put two and two together, the solution seems, well, obvious in hindsight maybe. Aang acted fast, took some clear steps. First, that suffering Andrographis paniculata was carefully dug up and moved into its own pot. And second, also really important, Aang used a new soil mix, one chosen specifically because it holds on to moisture better. Can you maybe break down the science there? Why was getting it alone so important, and what does moisture-retentive soil actually do?
Sure, absolutely. These steps might seem simple, but they're spot on based on how plants work. First, getting it into its own pot. That deals directly with the neighbor problem, the Bougainvillea factor. It takes the Andrographis out of an environment where its water supply was basically dictated by a plant with totally different needs.
Right, gives it its own schedule.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Aang can water it based on what it needs, not what the Bougainvillea needs, which is huge because different plants need different amounts of water. Then second, that moisture-retentive soil, that's key. Different soils hold water differently, Some drain super fast, some hold on to it. A mix designed to hold moisture usually has stuff like peat moss or coconut coir, maybe vermiculite.
Okay.
These things act like little sponges. They soak up water and release it slowly so the soil doesn't dry out completely between waterings. This directly tackles that inconsistent moisture problem by creating a more stable environment around the roots. It's not just about giving water, it's about giving it consistently. Plants, honestly, they're like us. They like routine.
Stability.
Yes. Choppy watering, especially underwatering, it stresses them out massively. It messes with root growth, nutrient uptake, just basic cell function. So providing steady moisture lets the roots do their job properly, absorb water and nutrients, reduces stress, helps the cells plump up again that turgor pressure, and lets all its internal processes get back to normal. That's what's needed for recovery, for getting back that healthy green color. It's a full plan to rescue it and help it thrive again.
And with those really thoughtful, targeted changes, Aang is feeling optimistic, hoping to see some real improvement over the next few weeks. It's a hopeful feeling, isn't it? Built on paying attention and taking the right simple actions. So what does this whole story mean for you, listening in? We've gone from suspecting complex issues, nutrients, pH, disease, through some sharp-eyed observation of the actual environment, to a solution that's elegant, simple, and effective. Inconsistent watering. It's about a plant, sure, but it's also like a mini parable for how we tackle problems generally.
Definitely. It really hammers home a wider lesson for all of us, I think. Sometimes the answers to problems that seem really complicated are actually hiding in the basics. In looking again at the fundamental factors, the immediate context, it comes down to diligent observation, really seeing what's going on and understanding the specific needs of whatever it is you're trying to nurture. Could be a plant, could be a project at work, maybe a new skill you're learning, could even be a relationship, right? We often jump to complex explanations or fancy solutions when the real issue is something surprisingly basic, a core element that's just off. Good nudge, perhaps, before launching into some big complex strategy, to just ask, is there a simple fundamental adjustment I could make first?
Absolutely. So here's something to maybe chew on as you go about your day. Think about a problem you're wrestling with right now. Maybe one where you've already gone down some complicated rabbit holes, exploring technical fixes or abstract ideas. Is it possible there's a simpler, more fundamental watering connection you've overlooked? What small, consistent tweak, some foundational adjustment, might actually be the key to turning things around and getting things back to a healthy, vibrant state? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.